Okay, so on one hand, we have Jim Cramer saying that it's a bull market, and then on the other hand, we have Michael Burry saying it's time to sell. Now, today we just had the FOMC make its rate decision, and there's a couple of things we have to talk about and what this means going forward for Tesla. So we just had the Federal Reserve hike by 25 basis points. Some people say 25 bips, but whatever you call it, it's very bullish. Now, I've said this publicly on the YouTube channel that if we get hiked by 25 basis points, this is going to be seen as bullish. And, I've also said this in advance in the Push and Profit private group, a couple weeks earlier, that this is going to be seen as bullish. Now, the overall market has been trending upwards, in part that they were already expecting a 25 basis points hike. Now, why is this seen as bullish, right? Because some people may be confused. Well, they're still raising the federal fund rate, which is, obviously going to raise interest rates. Why is this bullish? Well, here's the thing, right? So the overall market is expecting that if we get hiked by a lower amount, well, that means that the Federal Reserve is getting closer to a pause, and then once they pause, that's even closer to cutting rates, which is very optimistic, very bullish for the overall market. Now, as soon as I saw that we hiked by 25 basis points, I took a quick scalp trade with Tesla shares going upwards. However, I locked in my profits very early, right before Jerome Powell came to speak. I did re-enter after he spoke, but I cut my profits, or locked in profits, right before he came in to speak, simply because typically when Jerome Powell goes in to speak, it's very volatile, right? Think of it like an earnings call, right? And what he says is kind of like the forward guidance, kind of like I said, like an earnings call. And what he said today was very optimistic, very bullish, and I want to break a couple things down. So in Jerome Powell's speech today, he mentioned that what they're seeing is prices, consumer prices and products trend down, which is good, right? That shows that there's deflation in that area. He also mentioned that he's expecting to see housing prices cool off in the near future as well, which again just shows that they're very optimistic that the monetary policies are finally taking into effect and cooling down inflation. And then someone asked about, have they, discussed about a pause in one of their recent meetings, and he did mention that they have, right? Now, that's not saying that a pause is happening, in the next, meeting or the FOMC rate decision, right? That they're just going to completely pause. However, it's just optimistic that they're already considering the idea of pausing. However, I also want to highlight something interesting that he mentioned. And the reason why I want to highlight this as something interesting is because this is something I mentioned in the Push and Profit private group probably about a month ago, right? This is probably the main concern for the whole CPI report, and that is the fact that what they're seeing is that, service inflation is still actually trending upwards, right? So that's actually really bad because service inflation accounts for 50% of the CPI report. So although they're seeing, products, their prices, trend downwards, one of the issues is that service inflation is still trending upwards and the job market is still very tight. So this is kind of bearish. I feel like a lot of people glanced over this, but this is something that we covered in the Push and Profit private group, which if you're not in that group, you guys are missing out because we go into details about a lot of the macroeconomic climate, right? And so, one of the things that we have to really pay attention to is, are you going to see the labor market, kind of, soften up a bit, which is something that we need for the service inflation to actually trend down. So although the overall market is pretty bullish, this is obviously going to be good news for Tesla. One of the main things that we absolutely have to pay attention to is that service inflation. Now, I want to go ahead and show you guys what happened with Tesla today. We had a very big green candle, and in fact, we actually touched that resistance line. We actually went slightly above it. We closed down a little bit under it, but it's overall looking pretty good. Now, in the beginning of the video, I mentioned how Jim Cramer is telling you to buy and Michael Burry is telling you to sell, but one of the things I want to emphasize is that you should absolutely never trade based off anyone else's opinion, even if it's Michael Burry. In fact, he's been right about the last two recessions, the 69 other times he called it out. So that's something you want to definitely understand, that, you don't just want to follow every time he says sell, right? Because you'd be down a lot of money. But in reality, what I'm saying is that you have to pay attention to the data, right? And if we look at the technicals first of Tesla, if we see Tesla open up green above that resistance line, well, guess what? We could most likely see, higher highs take place for Tesla. And, as far as a macroeconomic climate, what we have to pay attention to is, like I said, that service inflation. If we can see, a little bit more softening in the labor market, because the labor market is what, pretty much contributes to service inflation, well, guess what? Then we could see that trending downwards, and we could see the Federal Reserve loosening up its monetary policies, which then creates an environment for stocks like Tesla to just thrive up. And me personally, I'm very optimistic in the next couple of years for Tesla. So I want to highlight some things that we definitely have to pay attention to, and also show you guys some significant catalyst events that could really help us determine which direction the overall market is heading. Right now, the first thing I want to just have you guys look at is just the QQQs, which is the NASDAQ Index ETF. And if you look on a weekly time frame, we're actually breaking out of a descending trend line, and we actually have one full candle just above that. So that's honestly very strong data pointing that price action is heading forward. Also, if you guys are familiar with the volume profile, we know that, based on the volume per price, that around this area, there's not a lot of volume. And so if the overall QQQ is trending upward in this direction, we could see big spikes up. Just as we saw when it was going down, it was big spikes down. So definitely something we have to pay attention to. If you want to learn more about volume profile, I have a separate video on that. You can check it out in my playlist. But, moving forward, I want to highlight something else that we have to pay attention to, and that is earnings, right? So we have the most significant earnings week, right, which we're halfway through. We just had Meta announce their earnings. I haven't quite got to listen to it yet, but tomorrow or Thursday, we have Amazon, Apple, and then Google, 3 of the largest mega caps, and this right here alone could move the overall market. This is something we have to pay attention to. Speaking about Meta, though, I do want to just take a look into that. I haven't got to look at the earnings just yet, but it looks like it's so far pretty bullish. We might have either beaten earnings or came close. But one of the things we have to pay attention to is the guidance, right? The forward guidance. Because even if a company has good earnings, we want to know what is the guidance for the company going forward into the year. So definitely something we have to pay attention to with earnings for the next couple of days. As far as today, we've had a lot of green movers today after earnings as well. So definitely a lot of good signs, right? Definitely a lot of good stuff. But as far as the technical aspect, the price action, that's all cool. But the main concern, like I said, is service inflation, and something to help us determine whether or not the labor market is softening is the report that's going to come February 3rd, the unemployment report, and then the average hourly earnings, right? These two right here, which both come out February 3rd, give us a better picture of some of the things that we have to pay attention to, right? So definitely a lot of good news. I'm going to go ahead and take a look into Tesla real quick, but I also wanted to share something with you guys real quick as well. There is a coupon code for the Push and Profit private group. It's probably one of the largest coupons I've ever given out. Simply, if you type in the coupon code VDAY, which is short for Valentine's Day, you get 80% off, right? I typed that wrong. It's VDAY, right? You get 80% off, making it only $80 to join the program. You have lifetime access. This does expire Valentine's Day, as the coupon code implies. So definitely take advantage of that on the first link in the description of this video. But going back to Tesla, it looks like, we did break above the resistance. However, we came down. If we could see Tesla, hold up around here, then overall that could be really a great sign for Tesla. I don't think we're going to have a crazy V-shaped recovery for the overall market and Tesla, as well. I think what we're most likely going to see is more of a Nike shape. We're going to see, obviously just like a small but steady increasing line. Of course, things can change with the data that comes out, which is why we have to pay attention to what is happening. With that being said, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys on this next video right over here. Take care, guys.